All right, we are back. Thanks for joining us here, Build and Paint Day at Other Realms. We are continuing along with our painting tutorials, tips and tricks kind of a thing. So, Tim, what have you got for us today?
So we're going to do a little bit of tricks and tips on painting an easy power sword.
Okay.
Got a few models up here. I'm going to do a blue power sword. I got an example of a purple and a flaming power sword, as well as the Sword of the Emperor off of Rute Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines.
Okay.
Which was a, I'm not going to do a tutorial on that one. Duncan, I pretty much followed it up right off the GW's website to do that, and thoroughly enjoyed painting that one. I was a little worried on that model, but he came out all right. But then I decided that I wanted to do something different and show the actual flaming power sword in an essence. So a little bit of mess ups in here, but that was a first attempt. The other side got pretty well, but had a lot of fun figuring out what I was going to do. So this is all done with a base coat of white, as I have pre-staged here on Eldrad Ultran of Ulthwé, a Farseer, named character Farseer from the Craft World Eldar. And start out, everything I've noticed makes a lot easier with white, and I can thank my buddy Jake over here for giving me those tips. He's definitely made some of my commission work a lot more of a breeze, and made it a lot more fun. And I've also taught my wife how to do some techniques about this too, so she's having some fun.
Excellent.
Painting on that. Shout out to my lovely wife Ashley. Thank you for all your hard work and help with my latest Death Guard commission. That was a lot of fun over the years. So I wish I could post up pics right now, but I could show you guys all the cool green and bright green and purples that we did on there. So
nice.
Here's an example of kind of what the technique is going to look like. It's fairly simple. I did it first off on a Grey Knight. I had a Grey Knights commission that I did for another friend of mine named Corey, who's since moved, but hey, best of luck to him in his next adventures.
Right.
So he gave me an extra Drago model, and I said, let's just play with it. So of course the initial spray of the model, I haven't done anything with it. I just did a little white, and this is about 3 layers of purple, and it's going to be using the Army Painter purple tone. If I got it here. Nah, I didn't bring it with me. But it's almost the same thing as the Army Painter blue tone, and it's just purple. And all I did was base coat with some white, some ceramite white, and did about 3 shades of the total. And after that, we did some highlights. So we'll show you a little bit of process here on Eldrad.
Okay.
So first up, we're going to make sure that we're getting our blue tone. And we want to make sure that it's nice and shaken up. Yeah. Now my palette is not like Jeff's, where it's got the little holes and dips. I like working a lot more, as you can see from my palette. I've been blending some purples together. I've been painting some Thousand Suns Marine, so as we dry, or as we let this stuff dry, I can show off some of those models too.
All right.
Because this is going to take a little bit of a process. You want to make sure it's kind of thinned out, not so much though. Probably need some water here in a second. But get a good coat, and you can always move it. So start from the bottom, because that's going to be your darkest area here.
Okay.
You want to make sure, because you're going to get it in the recesses. Don't worry about pooling it right now. You're just kind of getting the coverage, and you just want to work the paint where you need to into the actual model itself, and just get the entire thing coated. We're going to try one side at a time, because as I found when I started painting these, working with more than one side is kind of a pain in the butt. So you can see it gets pooled up on the edges here, and you just want to try and even coat it. We might end up just painting the whole thing all at once, just for fun. Allow for dry times on this, because you can see it's starting to kind of overhang. Look at the back side of your sword too. You can see if you don't like it, just dab it with your cloth or your finger or whatever. That's how I roll pretty much. And make sure that you get a nice even coverage, because you want to look at the model. Good lighting source is really nice. Get that paintbrush in there in those cracks and crevices. Try to get, you see how it's pulled up in that corner right there? Sorry for being shaky. This is a little nervous.
No, it's all good.
I talk in front of students all the time, but painting is a little different for me. So make sure you just get in those cracks and crevices. And we'll make sure that we're nice and even. So when it starts drying, you'll see that it's got a nice blue tone to it.
We'll get you some water.
All right.
here.
Hey, thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
And always make sure your brush is clean, especially when you're doing the next step. If you're doing your cleaning process, I highly recommend using a brush cleaner like Masters. Really works very well. And what will happen is, you can see this is a brand new one, so all I'm going to do is make sure that my brush goes in. I never want to stab at the actual brush cleaner.
Right.
I just want to kind of roll it into the brush itself, and slowly you'll see it. And just get a little bit of water, kind of make it frothy. And you can see some of that blue tone coming out of the paintbrush already, and it's just building slowly up on there. And just keep working the Masters paintbrush cleaner in there. This is also a good revitalizer, so it helps keep the tip of the brush nice. And you can let it sit and harden overnight. I've actually brought back a few brushes that were pretty destroyed from painting, 136 Poxwalkers for a commission. So, but you get some of that paint in there. You just go ahead and rinse off again, bring it back to the paintbrush cleaner. And again, slowly work to just slowly work the Masters paintbrush cleaner in there. Keeping these paintbrushes nice and fit is going to help you have clean lines. You're not going to have issues with bringing in extra paints, especially if you do a white and a red. You're going to end up with a pink color right afterwards. Not very nice. So always take your time. You allow maximum time to paint this. You can still see it's a little glossy. You can in the light there. So we're going to allow this to dry kind of, because what'll happen is if you don't let it dry, it'll bubble up in a certain area, and then you'll get what kind of happened on the power sword down here at the bottom, or like in between where the two colors were mixing together.
Okay.
Just trying it out, and then you start seeing it builds up in one area, and then it's like a bubble pops, and now you got the line of the bubble,
right,
and there's no paint in the middle, and it's really hard to try and recover from that. So the other side I did a little bit better in trying to blend that. This will probably be about my third time doing the flaming blending sword using two different paints, and we're gonna repaint Drago's. As we let this sit and dry, we're going to repaint Drago's purple sword, and we're going to paint it up with some ceramite white. And use a little bit of Le Mans medium, because you want to change the consistency to make it thinner. But not too thin. It looks like it's pretty thin by itself. We might not need that medium. Wet palettes really help keep the paint going. So make sure that I got it underneath so y'all can see it. Most of the time I paint really close and I'm bundled up in my chair. So,
the perfect painting posture is what that becomes.
Hunched over like Gollum pouring over the One Ring. So yeah, I'm not too worried about it's too thick in between where the little symbols is. You know what? This is a tester model. I don't have a Grey Knights army. The boss, my wife, says that I'm not allowed to get any more armies. So I'm just after I got Thousand Sons, I was pretty thrilled with that one. Get both sides nice and even. Again, remember thin coats so that way you can go back over it. Don't worry if that paint shows right through. As you can see, there's a little bit of purple still coming through.
Right.
Don't worry about that. You can just go over with another coat. And if you do have excess paint in that area, just go ahead and wipe it away. Wipe it away from the crevices. You're not going to hurt anything, but remember, everything's got to be a fluid stroke. If I decide that I want to, I missed a spot here, and I start up, I'm going to take away certain paint in another area, and it's not going to get that even consistency. So you can see some of it's happening. Then you want to make sure, especially when it's going with trying to get these whites blended, or even the colors that we'll be working with later, which are just glazes. So you can see this one's a little bit more dry. We can kind of add on. Purple's still showing through, so I'll just get the paint right where it needs to. make sure you always go in the same direction.
Mm-hmm.
Because then I can, if I decide there's two sides to the blade, right? So instead of going this way and then going the other side, I might wipe paint in opposite directions. So I'll always use the same direction. Always wait. That way it looks nice and even. Come back and take a look at it. White, you typically don't have to worry too much about cleaning out with the brush. The only reason why I clean so frequently is because it'll build up right in the bottom of the bristles there. And never want to lick your brushes either. Stick them in your mouth. As I found that brushes stay a lot more straight and pointy because they have starches in them. And if you lick the paintbrush, and you drink coffee, then the acidity in the coffee in your mouth starts breaking down the starches of the brush. So the next thing you know, it flares it out. You can bring it back out with, using your brush cleaner. But I noticed that as my wife and I were painting so many models that our brushes were starting to curl at the tips, and that was why. It was, I went, oh, okay.
Yeah. Even Jeff's learning stuff.
Teaching the master the abilities. Right?
Don't mind him. Do you see his fingerprints all over that base?
Yeah, look at that. All right. Now we're going to look at coming back to some of the blue. We're going to do a checkered pattern, so it's going to be kind of offset on the sword itself. Now it's fully dried. We want to make sure that that time's got it. So down at the bottom is going to be your darkest section, and then you want to alternate. So try and do one side at a time. Get where you want to have how big you want to have the squares or the checkered boxes. So you just start at one side, right? And you're just going to add this color. Now you might take multiple layers, and you can see there's a difference in the actual darkness of the color itself. So I'm just going to go up here a little bit. If you want more boxes, then paint more boxes. All right, I'm going to go up to the tip here. You make sure it's a little thin too, because if you start messing up, it'll pool in one area, and you can see it's already doing that. So you got to work with it a lot of times, but that's also what thinning it out is for, and blending it through, making sure you're staying in the same direction. So then we'll start at the very top here. Alright, so just kind of, you got that line where they overlap. I make this very simple and easy. Sometimes if you're painting for, I would probably not do this in a painting competition kind of thing, because it's a little dirty. You can see the lines are overlapping a little bit. But I painted a lot of Grey Knights, halberds, and power swords just like this, and customer really liked it, so I kept doing it. It was nice and easy. And that way we can take a look. And go back, and you can move that paint around, but if you see it starting to pool up on one edge or the other, you want to wait until it dries fully, because that little bubble that you see up there, you can move that bubble, the edges will dry, and then now you'll have kind of a blemish in the paint itself. Gotcha. So this is where you take the ultimate patience. So you're going to let those pieces dry, and the reason why you don't want to work on multiple sides is because if you tip the model over, or you're
moving that bubble,
you're moving that undried tone around. So we're going to look here at the white. Again, I'd clean off my brush because I don't want any blue. We're going to be using red and yellow, and we'll mix those two colors in the middle, and that's going to make that orange. So hopefully we'll get a nice blend and transition into that flaming power sword. Because I wanted to do something different. I didn't want to do a blue or anything like that with my my Emperor's Children. I mean, Soul Drinkers, Loyalist Space Marines, right? And I wanted to do something a little bit different. So, just sticks out.
Yeah.
And an off-white, not a true white for the helmet and shoulder pads. So it really made the model stick out. The only problem is I look like I'm playing with Rainbow Space Marines. It looks like I'm playing with a bunch of Power Rangers. So, again, don't lick your paintbrush. If you like licking your paintbrush, hey, you're an adult. You make your own decisions, right? I don't lick my paintbrush. You know, some people lick windows, other people lick paintbrushes. Whatever. Jeff's a paintbrush licker.
First step is admitting you have a problem, Jeff.
So we're going to go back again with another thin coat of white, just so that you can see that it's a lot smoother now.
Right.
That white is a lot more blended in, because you want to have that nice, good color. You want to be able to have a nice, smooth color. If any blemishes show up, the washes themselves or the colors themselves will show off all of those blemishes, or the thinness of your paint, or if you have too many brush strokes and it looks nasty in there, you just want to make sure it's nice and even coated. And take time. You know, be patient. This is supposed to be a hobby. You're supposed to have fun with it.
I think that might be the hardest lesson of all of the painting lessons, is to learn how to be patient with it.
You know, if there's some people that they like to paint, they enjoy painting, but don't play really terribly well with the game, and that's okay. And maybe you'll have an immaculately painted army as you're removing it from the table, and you can better yourself by saying, "Hey, my army looked better than the other guy."
Yeah, moral victory on that one. Sure, I've been raffle stomped 10 times in a row, but still.
So make sure that this dries completely. You know, then we'll look back at Eldrad. We might have to add, since this is drying out, you don't want to go back into it, so I take multiple pops at the palette. Try and get it to where I have evenness, so I have fresh paint each time. I've got to pop that bubble. Just don't do it on the model. You'll get a nice fat blemish in there. So work the paint into the brush again, so that way it's even. And of course you can utilize this to keep your the tip of your brush nice and straight. So we'll go back to Eldrad here. It looks pretty good. We got some dryness in other areas, but we can smooth that out after we start doing the lining and highlighting. You can really bring back the paint in the model, or in the actual, what am I trying to say here? You can bring back the color, so to speak. You can cover up any blemishes too when you start doing highlighting and dry brushing.
Right.
A lot of people say that dry brushing is not a technique. You know, well, yeah, it is. It gives me my edge highlights. You know, I'm not going to sit there and spend hours on a model trying to highlight each and every individual crest that's on there. No, I'm just going to quick and dirty. And we're just darkening these spots, creating that different transition. You can also move the model around too. I found that if I paint towards myself, I get a lot more control that way, you know. But if I paint away, it kind of arcs a little bit, so it goes off like a curveball. And so if I'm painting straight at myself, I can generally have better control with the paint itself. So get a little bit more down in here, so maybe we can take a look, see what we got. You can start seeing that checkered pattern going on there. Build up the color. You get it as dark as you want to, because eventually what will happen is you're going to want to blend in the colors again completely. So you do another wash over of the entire thing of blue tone just to start, because you'll see that it's getting too white in some areas and it's starting to darken up. But then you're building your color and you have fun with it.
Yep.
Yeah, trial and error. What's the worst thing that happened? You know. You leave fingerprints on the model, or you start dry brushing when you haven't let all of your tones dry in there.
Just making mud at that point.
Making mud.
Who would do that? That's just ridiculous.
You were the first to go, so you'll be the butt of every joke. Too bad Micah's not here.
We need another person to laugh.
His will come out really.
Oh gosh. Yeah, that orc still to this day. I sat there and I look at my Necron model. I'm going, yeah, no, not on that level. Not yet. Oh, yours was good. Man, that orc just came right out. Just stabbed everybody right in the face. Just green. I don't know what it is. Green just stuck out.
Well, it's also blended perfectly.
Yeah, he spent some time on that for sure.
Mine is the detail part, I think, was nice, but then it wasn't. It just kind of all looked one.
That's small, you
especially
know.
Next to his.
Yeah. So we're gonna try something here. I actually forgot which color I painted at the time because this was painted about last year. So I forget which color I actually painted first, but I think I did about half the sword, and then I went the other half and just tried to kind of mix those two colors together.
Okay.
I will just go with it. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? I turn up and I start having more blemishes in the sword, or I just redo everything after it dries,
There you
or
go.
I can wipe it away. So we'll try with red because it's a little bit darker in that aspect. And of course, utilize your wet palette to get that color in there, so that way you're not going back and forth to the pot. And you can close it up because that'll help prevent spillage. You know, when people just fling and knock over, and oh man, I just spent so many dollars on this. Now I lost half. So now you have access right here, and it's all contained like a sandbox for a 4-year-old. I got 2 kids. I got a 4 and a 2-year-old, so I can make those references.
Let me tell you all I know about sandboxes.
Yeah. So just start painting in those areas and make sure you could put it in there nice and heavy because you're going to be moving that paint around. And then this is where we're going to go quick because we don't want it to dry too much on us. And Jeff was probably smart about the aspect of getting all of his colors just right out in his palette. Me, I'm a little bit slower. And then we're just kind of going to come down because we want to start with this yellow at the top. All right, so we don't want to mix just yet. And we're just bringing it down into that red just ever so slightly. You can see it starting to bleed in there. So we let it dry and we kind of feather it in and around, bring it up, and we can get that color moving. And eventually what will happen is it'll just start transitioning. I think that's pretty decent right there. You got a little bit of orange, maybe a little bit more into the yellow, but you got to be careful because you can start dragging that red in or dragging the yellow down. So you want to make sure it's nice and even. Not too terribly bad for a first go.
Yeah.
And you want to let that dry so you don't let it pool down, and you can take your paintbrush. You got that red down at the bottom. You don't want that stuff to dry, so kind of take it away a little bit. And if you need to, make sure your brush is fully dry. You don't want to add any additional water to the whole shindig. So that way we can make sure it stays red down here. Bless you. Oh, I need to add more red in the bottom. So this is a little bit of a weird technique to try and grasp sometimes. I just stumbled upon it. Said I'm gonna try something. I'm just gonna try and move some paint in certain areas and then see how it works. I'm gonna try a different way on the other side. Let the glazes dry and see if that works a little bit better to create that overlap in that color. So yeah. So I like how that sits right there. And hopefully keeping since these are more watered down, they're glazes, they're not like shades or anything.
Right.
You want to try and keep that thing flat so that
Gravity doesn't.
gravity doesn't take place and move everything around. And a lot of times you're also going to get your natural highlights. You can see if I can bring it up a little bit. You can see natural highlights coming on the very high edge of the sword.
Yeah.
And that'll kind of help you out later on, that you don't need to make those lines so defined, but we can have fun with it. And so hopefully we can set this dude off to the side. keep it nice and straight. And we'll move back to Eldrad, get back that blue tone. Give a little shake again. Well, we might need another layer or two all the way over, but we'll see. We'll try and do it a little bit thinner this time. So a little bit of water or Le Mans medium, doesn't matter. You kind of thin this down a little bit. We're going to turn it more into a glaze because it is thinned out instead of a tone. Just go over. Hey. So it's looking a little bit better. As soon as this dries, we'll get a transition in to where we can see how to dry brush and get those nice defined lines in there. So hopefully, this is the biggest process. You got time.
A little bit of time.
You know.
So you said you had some models that you could look at.
Yeah. We got some 1,000 Suns.
All right, so. Now, do you find, you said you did commission work. Do you find that sometimes you go all out for the commission work, or do you go all out for yourself?
Well,
Try to do both.
Well, my first commission was it was a Death Guard Legion, so I wanted to showcase, skills and stuff. So what I charged to do it was probably way less than what the work was put into it and how many models there were. So it was my first time doing it, and I had a lot of fun. My customer really just wanted only for it to be bright green. So
Okay.
and I said, okay, well, I found the brightest green that I could, and it was from Fantasy and Games. It was called Goblin Flesh Green.
Okay.
And it was a little bit higher than Moot Green from Games Workshop. So it was super bright green. And as soon as I put it on, I went, whoa, I gotta dial this back in. This is a little crazy. But as soon as I showed the first test, I had a couple of test models, and I showed the customer, and he went with one of them and really picked out. And he said, "Okay, from there, we really want bright pinks and bright greens." So we had a lot of fun doing it.
Awesome.
And but it's a lot of the commission work. It depends now that I've developed a kind of better set of skills. I learned a lot painting a lot of the Death Guard and a few other things in between, and how to blend, and even coming down and talking to guys like Jeff and Micah when they're here, and even Charlie, and talking to Jake all the time when I come in. So I get a little bit of techniques and tips and tricks on how to do certain things. So here I got a Exalted Sorcerer on a disc from the 1,000 Suns.
Nice.
And this is just more of my test model. I got another one right here, and I got just working with purples and blues. So the blue I actually used for the armor. It's not the traditional 1,000 Suns. It's actually Scale Colors Adriatic Blue.
Okay.
And I airbrushed all the color on top of it. So I just had to thin this down a little bit in order to get it to work through the airbrush. And absolutely love the color. And I sprayed it over white. It really makes the model pop out. And then for the purple, what I did was I did a 2-part blend of Scale Colors Inktense Violet, and that's what you see down here on my palette, is just me messing with blending and stuff. And then Fantasy Games Putty White, because it was more malleable. I can use this. It wasn't as thick as the base Ceramite White.
Okay.
So I mixed these two together, and that's what I got on a purple cloak here. And see if I can show it to you a little bit better. And there was some blending, but I just did edge highlighting on a lot of the raised portions. And had a lot of fun with that purple cloak. Cloaks were coming a little bit more easy to me. It's always a bit of an issue before, but after talking to a few other painters around here, I started going, oh, let me try that, or watching YouTube videos on how other people did things.
Right.
And how simple you can make it.
Eventually you want to master all of them, but I mean, is there something that just feels like it comes easiest for you? Is it fabrics? Is it armor? Is it flesh?
Well, flesh I actually had a really hard time with.
Yeah.
And it never came out just right. But what I can recommend highly is the technique that Jake over here has ever told me, was to just to use washes. You know, you got your flesh tones, your strong tones, your dark tones. Most of the stuff is going to be from Army Painters, quick shade stuff.
Okay.
And I believe we have another one of the painters coming in talking about quick shading, so they can go through and talk about that later on. But utilizing it, painting it white, much like we're doing with the power swords and stuff, is we're painting it white and we're using washes to create that color. So the Inktense Violet is a little too bright by itself on top of white. I mean, it almost punches you straight in the face. So you have to kind of tone it down with a little bit of the white here. And as you can see on my palette, there's a difference in blending and darkness and light. And if you add more layers. But yeah, flesh was always probably my biggest troublesome area.
Right.
But using Army Painter's quick shade for flesh and going over with a Druchii Violet afterwards and little key areas kind of made it look more fleshy.
Okay.
I did some flayed ones for another customer for that plays out here, Jordan, and he liked it. So, and I was thoroughly happy with it too. But flesh can be easy. Washes make it really easy. It adds that depth and tone and color and gives you that good contrast. So that way, you know, it looks good. But the other thing is, it's simple and it's fast, and you know you can get those models out on the table. So much like what the blue arm is down here, that you know he's got 3 other arms sticking out of one.
Right.
One little arm socket. That's all it is white with a little bit of blue tone. The same process that we're using here with Eldrad's power sword or his Witchblade is the same process that we use for the arms.
I like the idea of that noticing that the technique will carry over from function to function. So that's really important.
Same thing with the green. You can't really see it, but the green down at the bottom here, painted. That's a flame that lifts the disc up. The flame that's over here is just ceramite white with Beltan green, shaded in place from Games Workshop. And I did a green smoke. I had about 6 Lords of Contagion that I had to paint, and they all had different smoke colors on the top. And I, you know, to distinguish between who was leading what, so that way I can. You know, that way the customer, there were subtle differences between each model and they weren't all the same.
Right.
He thoroughly enjoyed it. So, and I had fun doing it too. I developed a kind of a preference now. So the green really sticks out. So when I paint Airman, it's going to be a similar color of green that I have in here, maybe a little bit of a variation. But even in the staff too, I painted it white, shaded it Beltan green, and in the recesses I put Incubi Darkness.
Okay.
And it's kind of a dark bluish green, and I made it almost look jade kind of in the staff sense.
Oh, nice.
So, and anywhere that I messed up, I just redid with some ceramite white on the high edges, and I redid Beltan green. So it was really just a 2 or 3 color process, and made it very simple.
Excellent.
Hopefully we're getting pretty close to being dry on some of the models. Take a look here. Still got a little bit. You always want to make sure to give the maximum amount of time for these things to dry. You can see in a little bit of the Eldar design in the middle of the Witchblade, it's got a little bit of pooling up. So if you start dry brushing, you'll pull a Jeff and you'll muddy everything.
That's what we're calling that now. Yeah. That is in the vocabulary. You're pulling a Jeff.
And Drago's sitting over there drying still. That's going to take quite a while in order for that side to dry. Like I said, you want to do it one side at a time, because then if you keep flipping that model over, it moves the liquid around.
Gotcha.
And gives you a very terrible tone. But even in Guilliman. So this was a lot of fun for me. I had a lot of reservations with wanting to paint this one, because the fact that I didn't want to not do the sword any justice, so I looked and I stressed over it, and that was probably about the easiest part of the model. And then I did all the gold lining, and I absolutely hate that. And then about a year down the road, I went, I'm going to do Thousand Suns, and I realized they're also gold lined, so kind of punching myself for that one. But the base was fun to use. Maybe not so many techniques like Jeff uses, and you make it really muddy. I kind of wanted to make it look like city rubble. Probably could put a little bit more tone variation in the base. Maybe get some recommendations from our other masters around here. But had a lot of fun, but made it really quick. And did some marbling effect.
Nice.
And the eagle crest down here. And they're supposed to be torches on the back portion of the model. I thought those were lame, so I cut them off. I didn't want to.
There you go.
I didn't want to paint extra. I wanted it to be him. And plus, too, when you put it in a case, they break. And then next thing you know, you have this old plastic sitting there. So a lot of fun.
Do you ever get many
Make this
models like that where you're looking at them, you're like, I need to do this justice, and if I don't feel like I'm doing it justice, I don't want to touch it yet.
Right. I have quite a few. I've one of the, what is it? The Adeptus Custodes, the Lord Valaris or whatever his name is, the actual captain.
Okay.
And I want to do him some pretty good justice because he's kind of an iconic character. He looks pretty
Right. You
pretty
want him to
rad.
be the
I want him to
centerpiece
be
figures, right?
centerpiece, and that was a lot of times too. When I did the commission for Grey Knights and I did the commission for the Death Guard, I wanted to put a little bit more time in character models for commission work. Because they are going to be the center point, and they are going to be the focus of the army.
Yeah.
When you're doing a bunch of different models, you don't want to spend so much time. And there's a couple different ways you can paint each individual model separately, one at a time, and then you can kind of give them their full attention. Or you can do an assembly line process, and it's just painting all one color on a set of models. So that way you can get them all out, all done at once, and then here you have 10 models painted up ready to go, and you move on to the next 10.
Right.
So you have a plan. But yeah, do a lot more justice on character models. So with Guilliman, it was, he was the first loyalist Primarch to come back. And I love Space Marines. It was my first army that I bought here back in 1998. And I wanted to do him some justice. Most of the stuff that's in him, a lot of the white and the crests and things like that, there was gold in the box. It was gold on the box. I said, no, you got to add some tension to that model.
Yeah.
So you add some white into there, and it really makes it pop out.
It does. I think you're right. If it was just all gold, it would just get lost.
Yeah. Try to add that tension.
Very much true. Very true.
So let's go ahead and see what we got here as far as the Witchblade goes. We'll push back Guilliman. He's probably gonna take the Emperor's sword and smack some of those Thousand Suns over here in a couple seconds. So we'll see. So, color that I really like is Ultraman Gray. Ultraman Gray is a nice off-white. It's not super bright.
Okay.
You can get a lot of good color out of this. And it goes really good with blue because it does have a sort of grayish hue to it. But make sure you get a good shake out of the paint. Drago's sword looks like it's drying pretty good. We're not going to have much of a issue here pretty soon.
Excellent.
See, hopefully, if it's nice and done. Hopefully it'll be a good final product the way it's drying right now. I don't want to move the model and show. And it get a little messed up. So
Trust us, this thing you can't see is beautiful.
Yeah. So get a little bit of the paint in there, and always want to test it in a certain, test it out on your thumb or test it out on your finger or something, fingernail. You can see if you need more paint to be worked in there. A lot of times what I find is when you're dry brushing this stuff, you can wipe it away as soon as you put it on, and it's not going to really hurt the model much.
Okay.
So we'll try to get into the technique, and you stay with one direction. You don't want to go in all different directions because this is a sword, right? So the sword's got to have some certain symmetry to it. So always start with the sword at the very tip. You want to make sure it's nice and hot at the tip. And that's going to be the pointy end. You put the pointy end into the other man. That's the technique, right? So then you get some. Right. So there we go. We're starting to highlight those edges, and you can see that it's not that bad. You're catching that flare of the sword itself.
Yeah.
Then stay with it. Go around the edges. Don't want to go too heavy over the top of the dark areas of blue. That way you don't want to cover them up. And there you go. You can get a little bit of that. You can add more layers. Paula Deen, you can always add more if you need to. And if it starts messing up, then you know what? Go back with some blue tone and tone it back. Make it a little bit darker, and then you can work the paint back into it and add in that blue. The blue glaze, the Guilliman blue, works pretty well too to kind of feather in the colors and brighten it up. It looks like a really dark blue right now. So if you want to brighten it up that way, but we want to make the tip of the sword a little bit brighter, so we'll use some ceramite white. Actually, we might still have some down here that's nice and ready to use. So we get our, there we go. We can work it into the brush. We want to make sure that there's not all that water in the bottom of the bristles. So, and again, use the same direction. And this is the wife's model too. So she plays Craft World Eldar, and she kicked my butt last night in a game. She won on turn 2. We were playing open war cards, and she goes, "Oh, I claimed all 3 objectives. I win." I went, "You suck." So we're kind of just getting the tip really much brighter than the rest of the model. And again, utilize the same direction. So you can add a little bit of that. I don't know how well y'all can see that, but
Right there.
looks
looking
pretty
pretty good.
yeah. And then looks like we can do some edges over here. It's not going to hurt. My brushes aren't the greatest, but I mean, I haven't had a chance to replace them after painting 136 Poxwalkers and probably about 100 Death Guard and a Mortarion. So that was a lot of fun painting Mortarion. I just had wild. Such a great model. Pain in the butt though, and customer said that it actually broke during shipping, but it was the wing that broke off, so everything else was fine. The wings are really flimsy. They're not like Magnus where it goes into the body.
Okay.
It's more like the wings set down on top of the model itself. There's no real secure point. But there you have it. You know, there's some blueness. This is just quick and dirty. I mean, it didn't take very long, but you know, then you got the other side to do. So you want to try and match it up too, and get it nice. A lot of times people spend quite a few hours making sure that this is right. And it looks like Drago's sword is pretty darn dry and good.
Nice.
I love how that came out, and it feathered right in, so it dried nice and neat. And if you want, you could. I don't want to touch it for probably another few minutes or so because I want to let all those colors kind of set in and not drag the white through and pull the paint where it doesn't need to go. But that looks pretty darn good. I mean, look, attempt 1, attempt 1 versus attempt 2. I think the Drago sword came out a
really
lot
nice.
better.
Yeah, that looks really nice.
And then all it was you really just have 3 colors. And remember, this base coat with ceramite white. And do your bloodletter glaze at the bottom, and then bring down your Lamenter's yellow or your yellow glaze down into and just kind of mix it in between and pull those colors around. You get to play with it.
Excellent.
So, happy hobbying. That's my time.
Deuces, I'm out.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, if you ever have any tips, I'm down here pretty much every Monday night, or try to be, and always looking to talk and chit chat and give techniques and tips and tricks.
We're trying to show you everything on the camera right now, but really, what you come down and see in person is so much more intense. So please come on down. We like to put some of the finer models on display if the people let us, and make sure you come on down to Other Realms. Build and Paint Day is going on now, so we've got more tips and tricks for painting coming up. We've got Charlie coming up next. So what's Charlie doing? He's going to be working on...
What is Charlie doing?
Working on a kill team.
He's going to be working on a kill team. This
teams,
is pretty sweet. All right. So we'll have him coming up in just a few minutes.
Thanks, y'all. It's fun.